Welcome to episode 3 of the 2021 State of Security Operations video series, where we cover insights from the new State of Security Operations report, available at www.cyberres.com/stateofsecops. The report offers a snapshot of global security operations in 2021, pulling from the experiences of over 500 security operations executives and decision makers. Over the course of this series, we'll be interviewing C-level SecOps experts from CyberRes who contributed to the report. This week's interviewee is CyberRes's Global Chief Security Technologist, Jim Foote. Jim has been an IT and security executive his entire career, spending roughly the last 15 years as a Chief Security Officer. He's worked for Fortune 200 companies and has run his own cybersecurity consulting firm, where he helped secure companies across multiple different industries, including healthcare, manufacturing, and financial services. He earned a bachelor's in IT management from Western Governors University and an MBA from Washington State University. So thanks for joining us today, Jim. Happy to have you here.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So for the first question, what we always ask is what most surprised you from the report, and what stood out to you?
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a great question. One of the biggest things that stood out to me this year is the growth of the attack surface. And, this has largely been driven because of COVID. As companies had to shut down or partially close or go to a remote working environment, it has caused this massive sprawl of the threat surface as companies had to quickly pivot to remote workforce, had to move workloads from their data centers into the cloud, and move massive amounts of data from native workloads locally to reside now in the cloud. It's caused this expansive explosion of that attack surface, and it's had a pretty significant impact on security teams.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we've got a lot about that attack surface in the report. And one big job for CISOs is their need to earn the confidence of their fellow C-suite executives and their board of directors. And with big challenges like this attack surface coming up, it's especially critical for them this year. So in the State of Security Operations report, you mentioned that threat intelligence can help CISOs to accomplish that goal. So can you explain why earning the confidence of the board and C-suite is so important, and how threat intelligence can help with that?
Yeah, great question. In fact, in today's Wall Street Journal, the Justice Department announced that under the False Claims Act, they're going to start leveling significant penalties against companies for failing to adhere to cybersecurity standards or report cybersecurity events. And so as a CISO, it's my job, it's all of our jobs to make sure that we keep the C-suite informed. There's massive amounts of information out there. And one of the things that we've got to do as practitioners is to be able to distill complex security topics into terms that the board and the C-suite can understand. More and more boards are being held accountable, and in fact, in the financial sector, the FDIC requires the board of banking institutions to be accountable for the cybersecurity posture, and I think that's a trend that we're seeing more and more. And in fact, the impact that a cyber breach will have on a company is fairly significant. There's lots of data out there that the average share price within 14 days of a company being breached drops about 7.25%. And over a 3-year period will drop, as it will underperform the NASDAQ by about 13%. And so boards are being more painfully aware of the impact of a cyber breach could have on a company, and they're starting to ask the C-suite. And so, again, regulations increasing, and government agencies around the globe, not just in the US, but around the globe, are starting to take legal action against companies and CEOs for failing to provide the appropriate security controls and practices in place. And so as a security practitioner, we've got to use threat intel appropriate to the environment that our companies are operating in. and then to be able to communicate that upwards to the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, the board of directors, and help them understand, what risks exist, and do it in a transparent way so that the appropriate actions can be taken, and that the funding that is needed to secure a company is appropriate for the industries that they operate in. I think the other thing too is, on top of the regulatory and financial impacts that a breach can have, companies are becoming more and more aware of the impact of a cyber breach on the brand, and how consumer confidence is lost on a brand in a post cyber breach. In fact, it's 87% of consumers said they'll go to a competitor if they've lost trust in a company's ability to handle their data securely. And so it's all of these reasons that the CISO needs to be current on what's happening in the industry, and to be able to distill that down in a way that he or she can articulate it to the C-suite or the board of directors.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, that's very interesting, and it actually reminds me of a report I remember seeing probably just last year, might have been 2 years ago, about how 80% of customers would defect from a business if their data was compromised in a breach, and I believe like 90 to 95% would actually consider legal action. So, yeah, definitely, it's a top concern. It can be very costly. And I remember from the report, one of the quotes you shared in the report was about a scenario where the C-suite emails the CISO asking about a current threat. Can you elaborate on that scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, CEOs are paying more attention, obviously, to the cyber threats and attacks against their peer groups, against against companies in their vertical. And listen, be honest, we live in an information age, and the CEOs are getting threat intel being sent to their phones. And so why threat intelligence is so important to a CISO is you want to always be aware of something that's going on in the industry around the globe the moment it happens. The last thing that you want to do is have your CEO know something about an attack that you don't know about. And so in a ransomware case or something like that, again, the best way to build confidence is when you get that email, and you will inevitably get that email, to be able to respond and say, we've known about it for a week, we've already checked on these things, I think we're good. The reality is, Gartner says that by 2024, 75% of CEOs are going to be held personally liable for a cyber breach. And when you talk about the reporting legislation that's working through the system, that is going to continue to raise awareness. And I think that's why, the chief security officer being tied into good, reliable threat intelligent briefs will be critical to their success in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you. Thanks for that. So the next question we're going to ask is, I mean, a lot's happened in the past year, and the security industry saw a lot of evolution change. So what were some of the biggest changes that you saw in security operations, and how do you expect that those changes will impact SecOps teams going forward?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest transitions is if you kind of look back 10 years ago, CISOs like myself were looking for what we would call best of breed approach. And it was a portfolio of different tools and technology that we really felt like we needed to secure our companies. And what has happened is, if you fast forward, is we've now begun to compress under our own weight. And what I mean by that is we've taken our scarce resources and had to apply, and in my case, 40% of my resources were being used just to keep my tool set up and running, to keep the logs flowing in, to keep the infrastructure functioning. And when you have a scarce resource pool in security, that's a lot of resources. And so one of the things that I see happening in the industry is more tools don't mean more security. And I see a big effort, especially with CISOs, in consolidation, reduction in tools, integration of the tool sets that they've got, going with vendors that have a more complete or robust tool portfolio that is deeply integrated together. Because again, the cost, the operational cost of having 48 different vendors and 48 different integration points and so on and so forth, it just becomes such a burden or a weight that the security teams have to endure that they just can't endure it any longer. I read an article that said the average security organization has between 6 and 40 different tools, and that 95% of the time your security operations group is working off of multiple consoles. And what that creates is what I call security at the seams. It's where these technologies bolt together. There's a natural seam. And in that seam, there becomes opportunities to overlook an active threat or something that you really need to act upon.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I remember a few of your comments in the report around that. So anyone watching that would be interested in learning more, again, we recommend you go download the full report at www.cyberres.com/state of SecOps. And I just want to thank you again, Jim, for joining us today and for answering these questions. So thank you, everyone, and join us again next week for the next episode.
Thank you.